We are honored and deeply humbled to have the one, the only Luke Moon today. We have this kind of running joke, Luke and I, that either I'm his stunt double or he's my stunt double. You can kind of fixate on that for a minute and think about that. Luke and I want to talk about a topic that really came to it's been in the forefront since October 7th, but it really came to the forefront in the interview between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, the now infamous interview between Tucker and Ted Cruz. And the underpinning of this was that Ted Cruz at one point explains his personal reason for supporting Israel. In other words, he has a official reason and he has a personal motivation. And in his personal reason, he quoted the book of Genesis, where God says to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you and your descendants, and I will curse those who curse you and your descendants. And that's why he supports Israel, to which the internet, particularly the Jew-hating side of the internet, exploded and said all kinds of things, such as, that's not correct. Or my favorite one is, there's no difference modern Israel has nothing to do with ancient Israel. So this is a very long introduction, but you all needed to hear it because Luke promised, and we hope that he'll deliver on this promise and that he wasn't lying to me. Luke promised that he's going to help us navigate this theological statement, made by Ted Cruz, and then navigate the statements made by others. Luke, does that sound like did I frame that correctly?
Sounds great. Yeah, that's about it right there.
Okay.
It was that was a terrible exchange between Ted Cruz and Tucker, particularly at that point, right? Because Cruz said,
can we pause for a second and just watch it? So for our viewers, we're going to pause just for a second. We're going to watch this exchange. We'll be right back. Here's the exchange.
The reason is twofold. Number one, as a Christian, growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my. You pull out the phone and use the Google.
It's in Genesis. But so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it. And you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology. I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two,
well, hold on.
I'm not holding on.
Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
And so is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the descendants
God's
of Abraham.
referring to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
And by the way, it's not run by Benjamin Netanyahu as a dictator. It's a democratic country that elected.
He's the prime minister.
Right.
What?
But just like, America is the country run by Donald Trump. No, actually, the American people elected Donald Trump. The same principle
is there. This is silly. I'm talking about the political entity of modern Israel.
Yes, and that is
believe
Israel.
That's what God was talking about in Genesis.
I do.
Okay, Luke, now having watched that fresh, tell us about this exchange.
Right. Well, there's so many things with it. The fact that Ted Cruz couldn't actually name the place in the Bible where it was found is unhelpful, right? And then when Tucker then claims that, it means you have to support everything that Netanyahu does in order for you to receive the blessing. That kind of framing really it sets up goalposts that are super far apart from each other, right? Like it makes Cruz look like he doesn't know what he's talking about, but then makes any support looks like, well, it has to be total blanket without any exception support. My answer, had I been there, would have been, well, it's from Genesis 12:3, but I would have said when it came to does that mean you have to support everything that Netanyahu's government does? And I would say, well, whatever the Israeli government does that's aligned with biblical truth, yes, we should support that. And those things that are not, we don't. And I would apply that standard just about anywhere, like even here in the United States, right? Like support for a nation as religious people, you a Jew, me a Christian, is not dependent. It's not a blanket support for everything at all times. Like it's absurd. Nobody does that with anything, but somehow that is the standard by which we're measured for the blessing or the curses.
It's just like, Luke, I was thinking of this analogy. I wonder what you think of this. I always support my son. Sometimes he does stupid things and I don't support it when he does stupid things, but I love him regardless. Okay. Yes. And I encourage him when he does stupid things and I chastise him and say, hey, that was a dumb thing you just did. But it's in the context of love.
Right.
To your point, the standard that was set was an impossible standard.
Right. And so, but what it did, it set up this whole exchange that was not like spread far beyond Tucker and Ted Cruz to this full conversation about whether ancient and modern Israel are the same. And listen, there's several biblical passages that I could refer to. One of the things that they continued to refer to, this group that was kind of, beating this drum that modern and ancient Israel are not at all the same, comes from Galatians 3. Now, Galatians is one of the books in the New Testament. It's a book of Paul, one of the main writers of the New Testament. And he says in Galatians, actually, they make the argument that Galatians is evidence that, the church has wholesale altogether replaced Israel and the Jews as the people of God. And I don't think it says that at all. Actually, I would say what it makes the case for is actually the continuity of the covenants with Moses, the covenant with Abraham, the covenant with Noah, the covenant with Adam. See, like there's a verse in there that says, the law came 430 years after the promise, and the covenant that comes after does not nullify the covenant that comes before it. Now, the promise being referred to there is the Abrahamic covenant promise, which is twofold: the land and the people. See, like the anti-Semites, Matthew, always want to break those people apart. That's like either you love Jews and hate Israel, or love Israel and hate Jews. But it's like when you connect Israel and the Jews together, it means you're connecting the land and the people together, which is what the Abrahamic covenant's all about. So the Abrahamic covenant's the one they're always trying to undermine, and they're trying to undermine it here. They're saying like that covenant's over. And Paul is actually saying the opposite. No, like the one that came after, the Mosaic law came after the 430 years after the Abrahamic covenant, but it doesn't nullify that covenant. So if that's the principle, that means it applies not just to those, but it applies to the other covenants as well.
Now, wait, Luke, I need you to define something for me. You've said the word covenant many times, and rightly so, but can you help people understand at a very basic level what is a covenant? Why? And because you're talking about the covenant like it's the Constitution, which it is, like a spiritual constitution. Help us understand the significance of that, because that means that's the whole ball game. It sounds like to you,
right? Well, the covenants are basically these kind of let's say like contractual agreements between God and the Israelites, or in these cases, and like a particular Israelite, whether it's with Abraham or Moses or David, or going back further, Noah and Adam. Like these are like, listen, here's what I expect of you. And there will oftentimes be some symbol that is associated with that covenantal relationship. Circumcision is one of those like symbols. The rainbow in the sky in the story of Noah is a symbol of that covenant. Like so, there are these kind of pictures that come with it, but it's this, let's call it a contractual a relationship. And oftentimes, in the Near East at that time, the way that a covenant was made was quite grotesque. So, like, they would basically take, goats or something like that and cut them in half, like lengthwise. And they would lay out these, like dead, recently killed animals with kind of a path between them. And the two people signing or agreeing to the covenant would stand in between those dead animals, and they would say, if we break this covenant, this is will be what happens to us. It's not
Very
just
serious.
like it's very serious. It's not like, signing up for a new car. It's
we don't really have, is it fair to say, Luke, we don't really have an analogy for that today, because it also connotes it connotes like a sacred, you're saying, down to my soul I am pledging this covenant.
It's like a blood, it's like a blood oath kind of
because
connection.
Marriage is, they call it the marriage covenant, and yet, just open the, I was just going to say open the yellow pages. Boy, does that make me sound old. Just open the yellow pages and you find people that will help you break that covenant, no problem.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. But here's the thing about the Abrahamic covenant, and here's why I think it's actually very relevant to actually this conversation, is that in the story of God making his covenant with Abraham, Abraham does the splitting of the animals and lays them out. But then the text says that Abraham fell into a deep sleep. And it was God who walked and stood in the midst of that himself alone. So even though a normal covenantal relationship would have two people standing in the midst of that, God did not do that. And therefore, the covenant that God made with Abraham is basically a covenant that God makes with himself. So like, almost like, regardless of what happens, this I'm committed to. It's basically, it's a very one-sided, it's a unilateral, as covenant, if you will. Okay. And I'll tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the reason why it's important is because there's these moments in Israel's history when they are removed from an area, put into exile, sent into exile for some significant transaction. And I would say that, like, the covenant with Moses, the law, it's set up in a way that if you disobey this, you will be spit out of the land. Okay, so the land, the Israel being able to be in the land is dependent upon obedience to the law, but the ownership of the land is not. And so when God pushes out these moments where, Israelites, the Jews, are kicked out of the land, what the Bible says, the reason why they're brought back to the land, God says, they're not brought back to the land because of all the good things that they did, and they were amazing, and they were perfect, and they got everything together. No, God says, I will bring them back to the land because of my own faithfulness. Right? So the restoration of the Jews back to the land of Israel, both in the time of Nehemiah, which was early 500s BC or BCE, I guess some people like to say. And now, I would say we are in this same kind of ingathering period in which the Jews are coming back to the land from the north, the south, east, and west, back to the land that was promised to them as an everlasting covenant. It's not dependent upon how good the Jews are. It's not dependent upon the whether or not it's a monarchy, a democracy, or an oligarchy, or any kind of form of. It's not dependent upon whether the people that started it were secular or religious. None of that is relevant to why God chooses to restore the people back to the land. God says, I choose to restore people back to the land because of my faithfulness to them, because of that unilateral covenant that God made with his people through Abraham.
Luke, I want to know
I
this.
gave you a lot.
I want to know
Sorry.
this. So how is it that in Christianity, and I'm saying in Christianity because traditionally this has been a widely held view, and I know it's changed over time. How is it that Christianity suddenly said, okay, look, let me rephrase it this way. What is the biblical support for Christianity saying, hey, listen, we've replaced Israel. We've replaced the Jewish people. Your covenant now falls to us. What did or do people that hold that view use as biblical support for that view?
Well, there's quite a few actually, which is why I held to it for most of my my Christian faith, I would say. I mean, even in, again, Galatians 3, there's a verse that says, there's no longer Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. Okay, which is a way of saying like those divisions are gone. And I would say, as a Christian, yes, at the foot of the cross, we are all equal. But to think that there is no distinction, or that Paul would not make a distinction, like one of my kind of kill shots to that is, well, the Apostle Paul is very clear on the distinction between men and women. So he's saying that there's no difference between men and women in that passage, but in other passages, he's very clear that there's a difference between men and women. So if so you can't take that and make it a universal only, and say that the universal like obliterates the particular. And so so basically what happens is the churches that are kind of doing away with the particular calling to Israel and the Jewish people take the message, of Jesus, and they say it's a universal message. Go into all the world, preach the gospel, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Takes that message and it universalizes it, and says, therefore, because the message is universal, therefore there's no need or no room, or like we're done with the particular, which is the particular in most instances is actually the Jews or Israel. And so that's the break. And so I think they're wrong, and I could give lots of examples of how and why, but gotta save some stuff for.
Well, okay, I'm following you so far. I'm trying to understand. Let's begin back at the beginning. Why? Okay, if you take the fact that he didn't back it up, let's remove the fact that Senator Cruz could have done a better job backing up what he said. Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, I give him a lot of points because I don't think he was ready for the contentious style of the interview.
No, I agree. It's not. That was. I had not seen Tucker engage anyone like that since like basically the early days of like his show on Fox.
Right.
When he used to have people on that were like, he could kind of argue with, like it was like those days. That was he hasn't done that kind of interview in a long time.
And partly I think that, without getting too far afield, that's because he generally interviews people he agrees with. And so This was a different kind of an interview. So granting Ted Cruz the fact that he could have done a better job backing it up, but again, he was in the middle of 8,000 ping pong balls being lobbed at him. Why is that such an explosive statement? In other words, why did, even people I respect greatly, like Matt Walsh,
Mm.
came out and said, Ted Cruz is wrong. Christians, I'm again, grossly paraphrasing.
Right.
You'd have to go back and look at the tweet, but basically, Matt's a fact of the matter type of a guy. He didn't not making an emotional statement. And Matt said, Ted Cruz is wrong. There's no spiritual connection between the Jews and Israel and Christians anymore. It's, it's all been moved over to the church. So it's a very prevailing, or I don't know if it's prevailing, but I
actually think it's prevailing.
Okay.
I think it's actually the majority of Christians hold this view. Here's the thing is that, so there's a group of Christians out there that would take that statement, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And they take that statement and they make it like a means of, like, it's used in what's called the prosperity gospel. Listen, Matt, if you give me $1,000 today, you will get a spiritual blessing. And because God says, I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Like that kind of like televangelist style, almost manipulation is quite radioactive to a lot of Christians. They see that kind of stuff and they go, yuck. And then they also see the people who are the most prone to have the Israeli flags on their stuff and whatever, they fall into that camp. And then they also see that all those people don't talk a lot about Jesus, but they do talk about the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible a lot. And so you get this kind of pile-on effect where there's like we're over here with the sophisticated Christians, and the sophisticated Christians don't, rely on those old, simplistic understandings of like blessings and curses. And so it's and then you add on to that, one of the, and in the Jewish world, you guys rely on like Maimonides and et cetera. Like look at those guys as quite significant, figures in the Jewish sages. Well, one of our great sages is a guy named Augustine. And Augustine looks out of his window in North Africa in 425 or something like that. And he sees that the Jews are scattered all over the world. And he says, the Jews are scattered all over the world. See, God's done with the Jews. They rejected Jesus, and therefore they are scattered.
And Martin Luther said something similar later on. Yeah.
Basically after Augustine. So one of the challenges, Augustine basically allegorized a lot of the Hebrew Bible. Okay. So he took it from its, almost like a literal reading and made it allegory, and therefore, made it up to interpretation, but he's a church father, so his interpretations carry more weight. So, but he sees the Jews scattered, and therefore, see, we're done. And so, and he's kind of a model for how a lot of these people are thinking and acting and talking. And so you get that it doesn't change until 1948. And then when you get Israel as a established nation, suddenly, if Augustine was around today, he can't look out his window and see the Jews scattered. He has to see Israel. And so you have a lot of these pastors who are, would be good on a lot of other issues. And suddenly when it comes to Israel, they're like, got blinders on. They just cannot accept that God is doing something than what they expected and what, they read when they read Augustine.
Luke, this whole debate, this whole conversation, why does it matter? In other words, for the Christian community, why? Because I know just knowing you and having seen your reaction as this was all playing out, you were very much troubled by what was taking place. So why is it so significant?
Well, I think it's significant because I think you have this, what you have is a kind of rising narrative that is going specifically at Christians that support Israel, Christian Zionists, and it's, I tend to think of these things as being very they're not accidental, right? There's a concerted effort. Basically, if you look at the polling, the last holdout of support for Israel in the world comes from Christians. And if you can sever that relationship between Christians and Jews, or Christians and Israel, then we got them, as the other side would say. And so there's a lot of effort being spent, a lot of time, a lot of money being spent to target this relationship, and they're targeting it in a place where, unfortunately, the theology of support for Israel is not taught at a lot of major seminaries in the United States. So you're not getting it from a lot of, these up and coming pastors are not getting it taught to them. They're getting taught basically what Matt Walsh and others have been arguing. And so as a result, what you have is an unraveling of this kind of default support. And then we lose that support, and it's going to be hard to get back.
Also, I would say a thought that I had when you were speaking, Luke, was based on the biblical worldview, those that support Israel have the privilege of doing so. In other words, I've had some Christian leaders say to me, and I actually love this, say to me privately, hey, listen, one of the reasons I support Israel is I want God to bless me. And you could say that's spiritual selfishness. You could say that's spiritual realism. I don't care. I think it's beautiful. But the bottom line is that those people lose out on the privilege to be part of what God is doing in the world. And isn't that the biggest tragedy of it all?
Well, I think that's so true. And I would say that, again, like, I didn't come into this space I didn't grow up in as far as I could tell, a Christian Zionist home. I didn't read the Schofield Bible when I was, I was not a dispensationalist. I didn't grow up in this. And I would say that I used to pick on people that would use that framing that Ted Cruz did. I would pick on him. And then I started getting involved in this work and meeting people like you. And I cannot, the blessings that I have in my life are stuff that I've never seen before. It just really, I'm a blessed man. But here's what also happens. I mean, you have people like Candace Owen and others, dear friends of mine who I've watched over the years, that start to take this turn where they start taking shots at Israel and Jews. And, I would say, just as the blessings grow over time, it seems that the curses do too. Candace was normal at one point, Matthew. Totally normal. Actually, she was saying the stuff I wanted said. She was amazing. And then she just starts digging at the Jews. And next thing you know, it's like her primary obsession. It's all she talks about. It's actually kind of boring. It's it's almost like a form of Trump derangement syndrome. As soon as they start going at it, it's like the only thing they can think about.
Patrick Bet-David said, and I love Pat, partly, sometimes I agree with him, sometimes I don't, but he tries to call balls and strikes, and he tries to be fair.
Right.
And it's what I really respect about Pat. And he said that Israel derangement syndrome is up there at the very top.
It's so weird. And I think it's to me, what makes this a really interesting conversation is that, there's always the political conversation we're having, but suddenly when you get to Israel, it becomes theological. And that's fascinating to me, right? It becomes a different kind of conversation. And I love that kind of conversation for what it's worth. And it is this again, the blessings and the curses seem to fall out spiritually in a way. And that's hard for people to think about, like when you're going about making, all these guys that are making normal conversations about political matters, foreign policy. I mean, like, Steve Bannon weighed in on this issue. Like,
I didn't
why?
know that.
Yeah. No, he said, he says, oh, one of the big things that we say, as a Catholic, and not a very good one, like I'm paraphrasing, but like we recognize that we are the new Israel. And I'm like, okay, there you go. Like Steve Bannon doesn't go into that kind of stuff on a regular basis. And it is the only point I can think of, the only topic in the whole political discourse that causes some kind of veering off. I mean, heck, like when Trump gave his speech on bombing Iran, he like, whether he intended it was on the teleprompter, I'm very doubtful of, because he says, God, we love you. Like, where does that come from? Like, have you ever heard another, like,
No.
talking about NATO, Ukraine, talking about the big, beautiful bill, like, name another political topic in which, as soon as you get into proximity of it, Bible comes out, God comes out, theology comes out. To me, that's like actually one of the, like, it goes back to what I just said a few minutes ago, like the fact that, the restoration of Israel back to this land is because of God's faithfulness, so that the people of the world will look at God, like, know that this is the work of God. Like, it seems that this is what God wants, right? The fact that, every other conversation in the world never touches theology. As soon as you get to this one, Bible comes out. God becomes like somehow center in the conversation. I don't know, maybe I'm overly spiritualizing it, but it sure seems to be there's something there. That's all I'm gonna. That's just.
Well, I mean, look, it doesn't. To paraphrase Ben Gurion, he said something like, "In Israel, miracles are the realistic position," something like that. And the fact that you have a country that's been gone for thousands of years, that it returns, that the people from the country return to the land, that a language that is dead is revived. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out, if you're willing to look, that something special is going on.
But then you get attacked three times by Iran.
Huh?
You get attacked 3 times by Iran, missiles and missiles and missiles and missiles. Like those first 2 volleys, the ones that happened last year, what was it, like May or June, and then in August, like they didn't kill any Jews. In one, the first one, I think it was a Bedouin person, unfortunately. And the second one, it was some guy walking down the street in Jericho. Like, I don't know. I mean, it sucks to be those 2 for sure, but it sure seems like, I've read that there was over 1,000 drones launched at Israel in the last 12 days, over 500 rockets, and only 28 people died? I don't know, man. That seems
Unlikely.
Unlikely.
Do you think, Luke, that some of the issue could also stem from, I looked this up the other day, I'm curious. Do you know how many times the Hebrew Bible uses the word forever?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't know.
It's not something one thinks about often. I looked it up, and it's over.
Very Tucker conversation. Tucker asked, right? Like, what's the population of Iran?
Luke, obviously, you don't know. You don't know the Bible. You should apologize now. You're a fraud. Sorry, that's the best impression I can do. It says it over 100 times, and the significance of that is that this is God saying things such as keep Shabbat, and that's a sign between me and you forever. Right. And there's other things that God says, multiple times. This is a sign forever. And the problem is that you can't get around the word forever. And if you're a person of faith and again, I'm going to go back to Mike Huckabee's unbelievable greatest of all time line where he said to a Jewish audience where I was, he said, you can practice your faith without mine, but I can't practice my faith without yours. And so with the Jewish faith being the foundation of the Christian faith, why do you think that it's so obvious? I mean, again, I'm stepping outside myself and just using pure logic. It's so obvious. How do you miss it? You just don't think deeply about it. You don't misunderstanding.
I think, well, yeah, it's a bit of both of those things. I mean, it's like, again, like the people that tend to really focus on this within the Christian world tend to be a little strange, and it gets, I've now counted myself in that crowd, and you're almost like taught in Christian circles not to believe that the Jews have any significant relevance anymore in God's redemptive plan unless they become Christians, right? Like that is what you're taught. And so, and then if you don't know any Jews, which I don't think I knew any Jews until 2011, right? And so I don't know that I knew any Jews. I grew up in a context where this was not significant, not important, not relevant to my faith. And then there's a bunch of people who are over here saying, yeah, but it's really important. Yeah, but it's really important. I'm like, I don't think so. It doesn't matter that much. It's not like a tier one issue. And so it doesn't surprise me that we get in kind of these moments. What I'm particularly, I don't know, concerned about or think you spend a lot of time thinking about is, okay, well, if that's the case, then how do I change that? How do I reframe this issue and make it more mainstream? How do I get more people excited about, this topic, this issue? Obviously, it's people seem to be particularly interested in it in a way that they're not interested in other subjects. So I think I'm not surprised that people don't naturally just grab it, but I'm also like working really hard to change that.
What do you think, Luke, when you sit down with a fellow Christian who may disagree with you on this topic, what is it that makes the light go off?
I tell them a couple of things. One is that we who are Gentiles are like come late to the party. Like the first Gentile who becomes a follower of Jesus, that happens somewhere around 7 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. So what I'd say to Christians is, particularly Gentiles, like you are reading yourself into the story way before you're supposed to. Like you're not in there. Like this is a conversation, Jews to Jews. And the moment that the Gentiles come into it, they're like, whoa, what are we supposed to do with these guys? Like, what are they? Do they have to obey the law? Do they have to get circumcised? Do they have to keep kosher? Like, what's the things that the Gentiles have to do? And so actually, even in the New Testament, we're actually told several times what is the obligations of the Gentiles. And the obligations of the Gentiles is don't worship idols, don't eat strangled animals, don't drink blood, and don't fornicate. Okay, there's four things. We didn't succeed in most of human history, so it's not a surprise. But nonetheless, but Jews are not freed from the obligations of Torah anywhere in the New Testament that I see. And what I tell Christians is
the words forever, yeah.
Yeah. And so what I tell Christians is like you have to interpret scripture with scripture. And in Acts 21, Acts is kind of like the explainer history. Like here's we went here, we did this, we went here, we went that kind of thing. That part uh, the Apostle Paul goes back to Jerusalem and he meets with the elders, and they say, there are some out there that are saying that you are teaching Jews that they don't have to follow the law, that they don't have to circumcise their children, that they don't have to keep kosher. Therefore, go and offer sacrifices in the temple. And if Paul was thinking that Judaism was to be done away with, that would, like, that this is a whole break, we don't have to do anything, we don't have to circumcise, we don't have to keep kosher, we don't have to do the law. If he thought that, that would have been the moment where he would have challenged it, because he was not afraid to challenge like others, right? And so therefore, the fact that he does it, and does it willingly, and doesn't challenge the elders on that point, to me, you have to then interpret Galatians, Romans, Thessalonians, like all these books, through the lens of what Paul does at the very end of his ministry. And he doesn't do away with Judaism. And so my challenge to these pastors, these church leaders, these people, like, okay, like you want to grab Galatians 3 and show that, Israel of modern Israel is not biblical Israel. And what I say to them is, yeah, but what does Paul do in Acts? Like, you got to deal with that. Like, I know all of the weak spots in my arguments, but they don't know theirs because they've never been challenged deeply. And to me, put me in any front of them. We'll have a great, fun, long conversation that goes deep on theology.
Well, let's talk about let's wax spiritual for a minute. Go from theological to spiritual for a minute. Let me put it to you this way. There is some kind of spiritual magic, it's the best way I can describe it, that takes place when Christians and Jews partner together. I've seen it countless times. And I can tell you that being in Israel, and when you go to Israel and you see Christians come over and express their support, or vice versa, when you're in America and you see, Jews and Christians working together, which has happened on a lot of very important moral issues in both countries, and other, there's a magic that happens there. And so clearly, so what do you make of that? First of all, Luke, and because if there's so much opposition to this, God must be trying to do something good in the world. So walk me through that.
Well, I think that there is something really special that happens, and it happens. I would say it happens. Like I can't speak for what happens, inwardly to the Jews, but I can tell you what happens to the Christians. It's like if I don't know, if I look at this can from one direction my whole life, and I've read the Bible a ton of times, and then I meet someone like you, and you say, well, yeah, but what about this? And I'm like, well, oh yeah, wow. It's like it's this, like we're talking about the same text, and so suddenly I'm like, I never thought of it like that. And that to me is like, when you get some like nugget of new information, particularly about something you love, right? I love the Bible. I love everything about it. It's like, it's God's blueprint for humanity. It's like he set out and is like, hey guys, I know you think that you understand things like, I often do this. Like, you think you understand love. Well, let me tell you, love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, keeps no record of wrong, does not rejoice in evil, but rejoices in the truth, always hopes, always perseveres, love never fails, right? So like, we think, something is here, and God's like, no, 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 no. It's so much bigger than what you think. And so I love the Bible, And so to be like hanging out with people like you who read the same book, but like have been looking at it from a different angle than I have, and we get together and we're like, whoa, that's really cool. I don't know, it does something quite profound. And I think I get to see it, I get to watch it. And there's this other thing that I talk about a lot is that my staff jokingly call it like Luke's matters talk, right? But like the physicalness of things is significant to God. It's not just spiritual. It's not just all in our head, right? God could have done that. God could have just be like brain waves, like whatever that Elon Musk has invented, Neuralink or something like that. The
Right.
God Neuralink in the back. That could have been how it was, but it wasn't. Instead, he chooses like he makes heaven and earth, and then he forms a man, and then he gives him a helper, and then like it goes off the rails a bit, and then he picks up a man out of Ur of the Chaldeans to be his representative to his plan for returning all things back to the way that was in the garden. Like he has a plan and a purpose and a trajectory, and we're participating in that. And we get to participate, but it's physical and it's real and it takes up space and time and it's in a place. And actually, people can go there and you can stand there and you can stand where Abraham stood and Moses. Well, not Moses. He didn't make it. But
Knesset member, friend of yours and mine, Knesset member Ohad Tal,
yeah.
said on this program, just to reciprocate what you're saying, Luke, he said, I asked him, so, you're a Knesset member. You spent a lot of time working with Christians. What's the deal? He said, Christians, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, Christians remind us who we are and what we're about and what we're supposed to be doing. They remind us. So it's like it's like what a good friend does. When a friend comes alongside you and says, Luke, you do an amazing job. You bring people together. And you knew that, but you needed to hear it from somebody else to remind you that you knew that. And so I would just say, Luke, first of all, everybody should know about Luke's project, which I'd like you to talk about as we close in 1 second, but also just what I see, what I observe, which is when Christians and Jews come together, you see peace, you see progress, you see good things coming into the world. When there's this kind of strife, akin to what Ted Cruz was talking about, all you see is argument and strife. In other words, you don't see people saying, hey, you know what? There's no relationship between Jews and Israel and Christians. Therefore, I'm going to go love somebody today. Therefore, I'm going to go bless somebody today. The argument is used to say, that's why I can be
a jerk.
That's why I can be a jerk. I mean, forget anti-Semite, Jew hater. You can throw out your terms you want. I can be a jerk to these people because I have no moral or biblical obligation to be nice because we took the reins. You guys don't matter anymore. Go kiss it. I mean, that's really, at the end of the day, you can judge an idea. You can judge an idea by how it's implemented, right? When you see the results of families and love and well-adjusted kids, that parent is doing well. When you see some parent that's on a different path and their kids are burning down the house, that's the results of bad ideas. And at the end of the day, Luke, when I'm looking back and forth, I see harmony in one camp and I see discord in another, and I'm pro harmony.
Yeah, I'm pro harmony too. I think, and it's, I mean, you just nailed it. I mean, it really comes down to, like, again, it's like, part of me wonders, like, why is, I wonder if people who don't look at this whole space in any kind of like theological direction and go like, I'm surprised they're not curious as to why the world is so singularly obsessed with Israel and the Jewish people. Like, it is the obsession of the world.
No
it's
Jews,
not like
no news.
Things happen all over the world. Listen, the number of kids who will die today because of violence and war somewhere in the world is many, many, many times over anything that will happen in Gaza today. Anything, by far. It won't even be close. But the only place you will hear about kids dying is Gaza. And you have to believe, Hamas's numbers too, right? Like it makes, to me, it's like, is there not curiosity there? Like, are you not curious about why the world's so obsessed with Israel and the Jews? It's like, it just is a strange thing to me. And to think that like, what you just hit on was the fact that the people who then come out against it, like they are in such tension and turmoil and like angsty all the time about a lot of other stuff, right? Like they're not calm, chill human beings. The dudes who are like spend a lot of time speaking out against Jews and Israel, like they kind of they're like twerkers almost, right? Like they just get this like twitchiness I don't know.
Well, I mean, just put yourself in Tucker's shoes for a minute. I could very easily see that the reason that would be a disturbing statement for him is if Ted Cruz is right, he has to change his worldview. Right. In other words, if you accept that Ted Cruz is correct, then his entire orientation and attitude towards Israel has to be different. And that's why people say, well, whoa, why are you going there with that? Because ultimately what people realize is that your set of ideas change, what we just talked about, Luke. Yeah. Set of ideas changes your behavior. So if you've heard this conversation and you know that to be, if you don't know that to be true, just stop right now, because you're just either willfully ignorant or I'm just going to have to insult you in some other.
But doesn't Socrates say though that the unexamined life is not worth living?
Right.
Like at some point you go like, are you not curious about the thing that's the most curious in the entire world? Are you not? Come on. Like, yeah.
So if you are, then Luke Moon's group, the Philos Project, is for you. So I want you to tell us, Luke, in closing, what it is and how people can learn more. And I challenge anybody that's listening to this, especially if you disagree with Luke or watching this. If you disagree with Luke, he's the most awesome, loving guy. You can write Luke an email today and say, everything you said I think is garbage and utter nonsense. And Luke will say, which Starbucks do you want to go to and what can I get for you? This is Luke and his whole organization. This is their attitude. They want to sit down and engage you, not to try to like change your mind, but to sit down and be God's children and sit across from each other. So Luke, tell us about the Philos Project and where we can find out more about it.
Yeah, the Philos Project. Philos means friend in Greek. PHILOS. PhilosProject.org. If you want to go to a website, we are basically Christians that want to support Israel and the Jewish people. Want to see other Christians do the same. We also, there's Christian persecution happening in the Middle East, so we kind of raise awareness about that.
I'm sorry, Luke. We don't care about that. There's no Jews involved.
Well, it seems to be that nobody cares, which is why
it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing.
It's a horrible thing.
It's a horrible thing.
Yeah, and so to me, it's like we've kind of focused on those two things, particularly in the Middle East, and the other thing we started also that's for the Philos Project is like the general address, if you will. But if you're Catholic, we have a Philos Catholic program. If you're Hispanic, we have everything that you want to see in Spanish. We also, if you're on the younger side of things, we have Generation Zion, which has lots of, feisty T-shirts that say things like Jesus was a Zionist that you can buy over there. So we are a well-rounded organization of people, Christians that have chosen to make a life of encouraging Christian support for Israel and Jewish people.
Luke, I'm going to say something flagrantly biased, and I don't care, which is I love what you guys are doing. I hope more people find out about what you're doing, engage with what you're doing. And again, Luke, I'm telling you, you need to have like a Charlie Kirk style debate series where people come up, other Christians come up and ask you these questions, because I think it's a at the very least, it's a conversation worth having. And in the Jewish community, we're kind of on the outside watching these conversations, but we also know that that those people that come up to us with a hand of friendship are always loved and welcomed and cherished. We do not take you for granted. We know that the friends that we have are very special people, and we are humbled and honored and grateful for that. And just know that God's got our backs no matter what. But man, it's nice when other people join the journey. It's really nice to see.
Well, it's an honor. It's an honor to be chatting with you. It's an honor to call you a friend, and I'm in it for the long haul. So you stuck with me.
All right, guys, that is Luke Moon, the grand poobah of the Philos Project. Look them up, get involved, or yell at them. Either one, Luke's cool with it. Luke, thanks for being here today.
Of course, my pleasure.